If the mindset behind a draft pick or a signing is to support your franchise quarterback, it's hard to really fault that move. How can Howie Roseman continue to support Jalen Hurts through the 2025 NFL Draft? We'll get into it on this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcoming Eagles fans to this Friday edition of the show. We are brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for Armada's Player of the Week later on in the show. So we continue to dive into a number of different draft topics, mock drafts, player rankings, prospect versus prospect, getting you ready for the 2025 NFL Draft. And a lot of these picks have certain intentions to replace free agents that left, to continue to add depth to the most important positions, to maximize, to try to attempt to grab a prospect, to maximize a really deep class at certain positions. Like, there is specific intent with every single draft pick. But one angle of this draft that we really haven't discussed is QB1, is Jalen Hurts. When you look at Howie Roseman's track record, his draft history, just in general, his roster building philosophy, when he has a quarterback that he believes in, a lot of those top tier moves he makes, big name free agent signings, big time trades, trade ups in the draft for big name prospects, a lot of the time, not always, a lot of the time of supporting, protecting, just electrifying the offense of your franchise quarterback to maximize their ceiling. He did this with Carson Wentz. The execution was not there, but the philosophy, the attempt was absolutely there. He poured a lot of resources into the offensive line, into weapons for Carson to be the franchise quarterback. He has done the same with Jalen Hurts, and he has nailed pretty much every move he's made, and he goes really far with it. It's not just one receiver, okay, we're good. Like, Jalen doesn't need anybody else. He's got Devontae Smith. No, it's not just Devontae, and it's Dallas Goedert. It's not just those two, but we're going to add A.J. Brown. That's not enough either. We're going to add Saquon Barkley. That's still not enough. We're going to trade a third-round pick for a fifth option in the offense in Jahan Dotson. Like, that is Howie Roseman's MO. And I don't think, even though, again, taking a player on offense that could support Jalen Hurts this year from a positional need standpoint, based on the prospects that will be available, it might be seen as a reach. But as I said in the beginning of the show, if a move is made with the intention of trying to maximize and make your quarterback better, it's hard to ever fault it. And I could see Howie Roseman continuing that track record in 2025, especially when you consider where he is in the draft. If certain positions don't fall, if there's a run on certain spots and the best player available could be at a position that could really help Jalen Hurts in 2025, but also in the future, I don't hate the idea. It's not the number one thing that I'm gunning for, even if it is an offensive lineman, if it's a tight end, if it's a receiver, but I would understand all three moves, especially this year if you think that they're going to need Jalen Hurts to carry them a little bit more, right? If they need to pass the football more, if they want to keep Saquon Barkley healthy, if, let's say, Mekhi Becton's departure and maybe Dallas Goedert as well, if he's not in Philadelphia, it ends up downgrading the offense at certain spots. And let's say maybe the defense isn't, I don't think it's going to be bad next year, but let's say it's not the number one ranked unit in football next year, and there's maybe some more flaws, some more growing pains heading into 2025. Jalen Hurts might have to carry this football team a little bit more, at least for the start of the season, kind of like he did in 2023. And if that is the case, I think trying to add and support him more through this draft is not a bad idea. And I'm fully convinced that if Jalen Hurts, by the way, if he has to carry this football team this year, after watching him in the NFC Championship, after watching him in the Super Bowl, we also saw it in 2022, the first half of 2023 when he was an MVP favorite. I think we know he can do that, right? So he can carry this team, and he might have to, a little bit more than last year. However, you shouldn't if you don't have to put more pressure on your quarterback, if you can make it easier, then you should always make moves to make it easier for your quarterback. There's always this shame on, NFL Twitter, Eagles Twitter, other teams' Twitters, right? About, the Eagles, Jalen Hurts doesn't have to do as much as other quarterbacks. It's almost like to knock down his status, his ranking among other quarterbacks in the NFL. And maybe that's fine, whatever. I don't I'm not saying that's a terrible argument when you're ranking quarterbacks, but from an Eagles perspective, good. We want it to be as easy on Hurts as possible. And like he said this year, just because we don't do something doesn't mean we can't. And Jalen Hurts, can he carry you this year more than last year? Absolutely. And he might have to. We believe he can. But we don't want him to. You should never want your quarterback to have to do that. Because if he's not doing that, that means you have a stacked roster that's made it a lot easier on him. And he can be a 2024 version of himself that doesn't have to win you every single game, every single play, even like Carson Wentz used to have to back in the day. So I think if that is the intention of this year's draft for Howie Roseman, or at least with some picks, maybe it's not the first round pick and the second round pick and the third round pick, but if it's one of those picks, it's never going to be my idea to criticize a GM for trying to help out their quarterback. If that is the intention with one of these top 3 picks, especially early on, let's say with that first round selection, maybe the second rounder as well, who are the 5 prospects that would help Jalen the most in 2025? I think the top 2 guys are the top 2 tight ends that are not named Tyler Warren. To me, it's Michigan tight end Colston Loveland, and then it's LSU tight end Mason Taylor. To me, those are the 2 guys that could have the biggest impact on making things easy for Jalen in 2025. And that's even if Dallas Goedert is back next year. Like if you add another really good pass catching tight end to that offense, and now you can use 12 personnel, you add another big body, a technician like one of these 2 guys with really good size, really good separation ability, really good hands. If you can add that kind of weapon over the middle of the field for Jalen Hurts, I think that'll make the biggest impact for him this year. And especially if Dallas Goedert's gone. Dallas Goedert's a guy, I've said it on the show before, that Jalen Hurts really relies on in the clutch, fourth quarter, on third downs, over the middle of the field. Dallas Goedert's a run after the catch nightmare at tight end. He makes it easy on his quarterback. A 3 to 4 yard completion like we saw against the Packers in the playoffs can go for a 20-plus yard touchdown. So to me, having that kind of player to replace Goedert or to add on to the offense, I think would make the biggest impact, right? And I think when you look at that second tier of tight ends, I think, of course, number 1 is Tyler Warren, and then it's Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor. You could talk about Harold Fannin, Elijah Arroyo, Gunnar Helm as well. Those players in that second tier. I think Loveland and Taylor are the most complete guys. So maybe Arroyo has the higher ceiling. Maybe Fannin can make more flashy plays right away. But who would have the highest, the most instant impact on Jalen this year? I think it would be Loveland and or Taylor. Like they have the most complete skill set that from day one, I think they're both going to be playmakers at the next level. The third prospect to me that if you add early is going to help out Jalen Hurts the most. Again, if it's about maximizing your franchise quarterback in the draft this year, it's about continuing to support Jalen. I think it's Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, right? I think protecting your quarterback is always a top priority. And sure, can Tyler Steen or Kenyon Green be that guy to replace Mekhi Becton at right guard? Of course. But the Eagles don't like to settle on the offensive line. They don't want to take risks there. And if they know they can upgrade that spot and continue to have 5 really good players in front of Jalen Hurts, protecting him, giving him time to get the ball to all of these incredible weapons on this offense, like they're always going to try to do that. And I think Donovan Jackson is the best guy that will likely, of all the offensive linemen that will be available to them at 32 or in the form of a small trade up, I think Donovan Jackson is going to be that best player that can right away play at a really high level at right guard, and then he could be maybe an even bigger piece of the puzzle long term as potentially, I'm just saying potentially, the long-term right tackle replacement to Lane Johnson. So I think adding that protection, making sure right guard, like guaranteeing now between Jackson, Steen, and Green, you know you're getting at least one high-quality starter. Like the winner of that battle should be a pretty good player because that's a really strong battle at right guard between 3 players. Making sure that you know there's no holes on the offensive line for Jalen. He has, of course, incredible mobility, so he's going to be able to escape and make it easier on his offensive line. But if you can make it easy on Jalen by adding to the offensive line, that's a really good idea and should always be one of your top choices when it comes to a decision. So Donovan Jackson would be, to me, number 3. Number 4, I mentioned him briefly on the show yesterday. I don't think it's crazy to consider somebody like Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka in the first round. Now, of course, I like to joke around about like Matthew Golden from Texas and talk about the burners like Isaiah Bond from Texas as well in the second round. Just discuss. I did this last year with Xavier Worthy, talk about how fun it would be to imagine a guy like that in this offense with these weapons. It's not very realistic, but somebody like Ibuka, if they were going to do this and take a receiver in the first round, I think it would be him because he has the possession ability, the over the middle of the field, good hands in traffic, good route running. He can play in the slot. He can play on the outside. He's a good blocker. If you decide your third passing target behind Smith and Brown, if Goddard's gone, is going to be a receiver, Ibuka, I think, makes the most sense. And I could totally see them liking him. He went to a huge school that won the national championship. He was the best playmaker in a loaded offense, right? I think they would like Ibuka. And you look at, it's not a crazy idea to draft a receiver. Dotson's on a 1-year contract. He's got 1 year left on his deal. I doubt they pick up the 5th-year option. A.J. Brown's 27. By the time, let's say, a rookie receiver's first contract is done or it's at the end of year 3 where that extension normally comes, he'll be 30, 31 years old. Like, I don't think it's one of their top priorities, and I don't think they draft a burner like Matthew Golden. But if an Ibuka falls to 32, and he also value-wise would be, I think be a steal at that pick, I don't think it's crazy to consider. So he's another guy that right away I think could really help Jalen Hurts. And then number 5 is Harold Fannin, the Bowling Green tight end. A huge emphasis they should add on the offense this year on the passing game is to just get Jalen easier completions in space. Like, get the ball out quicker in his playmaker's hands. Harold Fannin, to me, is one of the best run-after-the-catch tight ends I've seen coming out of a draft class in a very long time. He had over 800 yards after the catch last year out of Bowling Green. Not another tight end had over 700. Like, that's how much of a weapon Fannin is. Even if he's a little more undersized for a tight end, he's not your traditional hand in the dirt blocking kind of tight end. He's not going to replace Goddard in that way. Adding a weapon like that can really make plays in the screen game, just quick plays, quick throws, play action rollouts, plays over the middle of the field, contested catches. Fannin is that day 2 pick that I think would make the biggest impact for Jalen. So those are the top guys I think that if you want to continue to support Jalen Hurts and go even overboard on adding talent around him, those are 5 prospects I think the Eagles would want to add the most. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, I think it's very likely that Howie Roseman is going to either trade up or trade down in the first round of the draft. I would put it at like a 95% chance that's what happens. If he does, it takes 2 to tango. Who are the teams he should call? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by the Nissan Armada of 2025. So the Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're going to take a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push their team forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut Player of the Week, for me, is going to be James Pierce Jr. of Tennessee. I just can't stop thinking about the idea. I keep seeing more mock drafts where the Eagles get James Pierce, not even with a trade-up, but with the 32nd overall pick. If the NFL lets this guy fall, like Jalen Carter did, like Nolan Smith did, like Quinyon Mitchell, I think it's just going to be the next story of how everybody says, how did they let Howie Roseman do it? He did it, how he did it again. How did the NFL let the Eagles get this player? He's got the speed, the elite ceiling to be a top-tier pass rusher at the next level. And honestly, that's exactly what the Nissan Armada has as well. It's heavy duty, rugged, conquers the road with capability and confidence. Dream big, go big. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think James Pierce is going to do as well. It's clear our Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada Rogue or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. So again, like I said, I think it's very likely that Howie Roseman is going to trade up or trade down in this draft. At 32nd overall, I just doubt there's a guy that falls all the way to that pick where the Eagles feel like it's worth the draft pick. I just feel like there's going to be the guys on the board, they'll probably say, we could do a little bit better if we trade down and collect some picks and the player we get with that early second round selection is not going to be much worse. Or, hey, there's a drop off. There's some players falling. If we don't get one of these guys, the next tier, there's a big drop off. It's just not worth sitting here. Like, I just don't think there's going to be a guy, and maybe there is. Who knows? Again, it happened with Nolan Smith 2 years ago. You never know. But odds are I think it's going to be a very similar outcome to 2018 where they're either trading up or trading out of that 32nd overall pick. If that is the case, who are the teams I think that the Eagles will be most likely to call? Who are the teams that would be most likely to call the Eagles wanting that selection? When it comes to a trade up, there are 3 teams that I'm pinpointing specifically. Minnesota's the number 1 team with that 24th overall pick. Minnesota only has 4 draft picks this year. With J.J. McCarthy in his second year as a first-time starter, they're going to want more draft picks to surround him with talent. I think moving down like 8 spots isn't a bad idea for Minnesota, and I think they could use about pretty much everything on defense, just a little bit of everything. They don't have a lot of like massive holes. They have some good pieces, but it's a lot of short-term, older pieces, and so I think more draft picks, the better. For Minnesota, only having 4 selections, they're going to want to collect more. They might be comfortable moving down and saying, hey, we're going to go the best defensive player available at that 32nd overall pick. There might not be a huge drop-off from 32 to 24. Maybe there's a guy the Eagles see that fell just far enough where they're like, that's our guy, let's go get him. Maybe it's one of those Georgia guys. Maybe it's a Nickham and Worry, or maybe it is a James Pierce. I think if the Eagles find somebody they really want to trade up for, who's the team to pick that's realistic, that's not moving up inside like the top 15? I think it's Minnesota at 24. I think the Rams at 26 would make sense as well. The Rams have been really good at drafting lately, especially on day 2 and day 3. They filled a lot of their holes on the front 7 of their defense. The offensive line has gotten better. They have Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams for Matt Stafford. I think that's the second best team in the NFC. Not a lot of glaring holes. Could they decide to move down and collect more picks where they do really well on day 2 and day 3, move down 6 spots from 26 to 32, and then decide they're going to take the best defensive back or receiver at 32, where, again, for those positions, I think the drop-off won't be crazy from 26 to 32. That's where they need the most help, I think, is in the secondary. And at that point, it's going to be like, would you rather have a Jahdae Barron or a Trey Amos? Would you rather have Nickham and Worry or Malachi Starks? Like, I don't know. The drop-off might not be crazy for the DBs from 26 to 32. So I think the Rams are another team to target. Just up the board a little bit where it's realistic for the Eagles to move up the board. And then if they're thinking like a big trade up, I know I've done like a mock trade before with the Colts at 14. Moving up from 32 to 14 is going to be steep. That might cost you like a first-round pick next year, multiple 2s and 3s. Like, that's going to be really hard. I tried to throw Dallas Goedert in there to help, but it would be very difficult to get inside the top 15. But let's say they want to get inside the top 20, which I don't think is absolutely crazy in this draft class. I think the 2 teams I'm looking at the most are Seattle and Tampa Bay. Like, if you're trying to get inside the top 20, but the top 15 is going to be just too difficult and you don't want to give away a top 2-round pick next year, maybe you still would to get inside the top 20, but I think right inside that top 20, 18, 19, I'm circling Seattle, Tampa Bay, more complete teams than we give them credit for. Maybe they want to collect some more assets. Those are 2 teams that I'm circling that I'm feeling like would be open to a deal. So those are the 6 to 7 teams I'm saying, or I should say the 3 to 4, that if they're trading up, those are the teams they should call. When it comes to the other teams that I'm going to discuss here that they should trade down with, that would potentially call Howie Roseman, I'm thinking about the quarterback position. I think these teams would want to come back up for a Jackson Dart. Maybe they want to take a chance on Jalen Milroe. Blue chip ability to run the football, that cannon of an arm. Yes, he is raw as all hell when it comes to other traits as a pocket passer, diagnosing coverages, accuracy. Like Jalen Milroe, it's as high of a variance for a quarterback prospect as they come. Super high ceiling, superstar ceiling, one of the biggest busts of all time, level of floor. But maybe a team wants to take a chance on a player like that, or somebody like Jackson Dart. Get that 5th-year option for a quarterback is so important if they pan out to add on to that massive second extension they would get. There's 3 teams that I think could call the Eagles in a very Baltimore-like fashion from 2018 when they wanted Lamar Jackson at 32. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Pittsburgh's a little behind the 8 ball because they don't have a second-round pick to offer the Eagles, but let's say they offer them like a 3 and then like a first or second rounder next year. Like if you can get there one in 2026, are you okay not getting back a second rounder this year? I might be. Then you have 2 first rounders next year, a second and 2 thirds. Like that might be an idea. And I think Pittsburgh, even if they sign Aaron Rodgers, they've got to try at least like the Kenny Pickett mid-round, 3rd, 4th kind of quarterback prospect try again, because as long as they're at 9 and 8 every year, these are the kind of prospects they're going to get to choose from. So they got to just keep taking a swing. I would say Cleveland is the second team that I'm watching. They have the first pick in the second round. So this might be the ideal team for the Eagles to even call up if they want to move up. If Cleveland, let's say, takes Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter with that second overall pick, they don't feel like there's a drop-off between Sanders and one of these guys like Dart or Milrow. Maybe they want to trade back up into the first round. They give the Eagles that first pick in the second round. I could totally see that happening because Cleveland, again, they could probably get Dart or Milrow with that next pick, but it might be worth spending another draft pick with Philly to get that 5th-year option. Again, that 5th-year option is really important, and because they're going to know likely other teams are thinking the same thing, and they might have competition for that pick. Pittsburgh, like I said, might be calling them up. Maybe the New York Giants. That's the third team I'm watching that could call the Eagles is New York. Like if they also decide we're not going to take Sanders if he's there at 3, we signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, we're going to go with the best player available, whether that's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, and take a guy in round 2 or come back at 32nd overall. I think New York is also a team that would be willing to call Philadelphia up. So between Pittsburgh, Cleveland, New York, Minnesota, LA, Seattle, Tampa, I think there's a lot of options. If Howie Roseman wants to trade up or trade down, I think it's very unlikely they pick with that 32nd overall selection. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show, getting into Vic Fangio's comments about Cooper DeJean staying in the slot in 2025. I think he nailed it right on the head with what Cooper's role should be next year. So we'll get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, so Vic Fangio wants Cooper DeJean to stay in the slot, stay as the nickel cornerback in year 2. I think that is the exact right decision from Vic Fangio, and I loved what he said with John Clark. Quote, I really like him, talking about Cooper DeJean as the nickel. I'd like to see him stay at nickel. He plays it very well. He's got good size in there. He really likes playing there. Fangio knows that DeJean's ceiling is in the slot. And look, can Cooper DeJean play on the outside? Can he play the boundary? Yeah, of course. Like, I think he could do that. But I think the combination of Keely Ringo on the outside with Quinyon Mitchell on the other side and Cooper DeJean in the slot is a much better outcome. Even if Ringo is okay, good to okay at corner, DeJean, we know, is elite in the slot. Quinyon Mitchell is elite on the other side at corner. And then if Ringo is just like what Darius Slay was last year, maybe even if he is a little bit worse, I think that's a much better outcome than Cooper DeJean on the outside, which I still think would be a really good player. He did that the majority of the time he was with the Iowa Hawkeyes. He was a boundary outside corner. But DeJean on the outside, I think, is a good, not great corner. In the slot, I think he's elite. That combination of Ringo and DeJean versus DeJean on the outside, and then you add another nickel corner, whether that's through the draft or through free agency, or you add like a Dory Jackson playing there. I just don't think that's the move. I think Cooper DeJean, honestly, I want him to not only be the nickel corner next year, I want him to be playing an even more versatile inside role than he did next year. So not only do I not want him going to the outside, I want him doing even more on the inside. I'd love to see him used more as like a robber type of player in zone coverage, a matchup type of guy that each team comes around and they're like, we want Coop to just be on their tight end all game. We want him at times on this running back. Like I think Coop, like certain receivers, we want him no matter where that receiver goes. Like he's the option for that player, almost like a basketball box and one kind of zone where Coop is just like a Swiss Army knife, a Brian Branch type from Detroit, or when you had Malcolm Jenkins. I think there's another even more versatile role DeJean can have inside. And that's why I want to add another inside defensive back that can cover. Like that's why I really like the idea of Jahdae Barron from Texas in the first round, because I don't want DeJean to always have to just play nickel. That spot, he's not moving. I want him to sometimes be matchup-based week after week. And right now, DeJean's really their only good inside coverage defensive back that I feel confident in without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the team. Sidney Brown's strength is not one-on-one man coverage. Even in zone, I don't think coverage is his strong suit when he's assigned on a player. Reed Blankenship, the same thing. They're not great one-on-one safeties. So I think DeJean's role right now would be kind of what it was last year. But if you want to be even more creative with Coop in 2025 and move him around the formation, that's something I would love to do to maximize his potential. I think adding another inside coverage defensive back whose strength is in man coverage, he's a sticky defender. I think that's a priority in this draft. Because again, like I said, right now your two safeties, they're not those players. So not only is Vic right that he should be just staying at nickel, I think I want him doing even more on the inside. I don't want to see him on the boundary. I'm a believer in Keely Ringo, but even if you don't believe in Ringo, you've got Adoree Jackson. Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there on the open market. Heck, so is Rasul Douglas. There are some good options at corner on day 2 of this draft. I just think that's the right move. And the slot cornerback position, it's so crucial nowadays. It's not a coincidence that all 3 times the Eagles made the Super Bowl and won 2 in the last decade, they had an elite slot corner that year. Patrick Robinson was one of the best slot corners in all of football in 2017. Avonte Maddox, say what you will about Avonte the last few years. In 2022, that was one of his best years of his career. You can make the argument that was the best year of his career. That season, he was really good in 2018 and 2021 as well, but Avonte was a legitimate player in 22. And then Cooper DeJean this year. Having a slot in the modern day NFL is so important with all of the elite inside weapons, the Puka Nakuas of the world, the tight ends that play inside, the CeeDee Lambs of the world. You got to have a guy in there that can cover, especially if you're a defense like the Eagles are, where they don't have corners shadowing. So having a guy in there that's not going to move, that can cover the best of the best, all different types of weapons like DeJean can, fast guys, big guys, running backs, different positions, it doesn't matter. That's so important. And it's even more so important nowadays because of the added emphasis on the run game in the NFL with more cover 2 shells. You want a guy in there that can play the run, but is also a defensive back. You can't afford to not have defensive backs on the field, but you need those guys to be good against the run, like Cooper DeJean is. Much better than P-Rob was or Avonte Maddox. So he's a Swiss Army knife inside, and I just don't think, again, can he be a boundary corner and be a really good one? I'm sure he can be. But I think he could be a superstar, and he's already a star in the slot. So Vic Fangio knows that. We'll see what happens, though. He said in that interview, quote, "Sometimes I have to do things I don't want to," referring to playing DeJean on the boundary. If Ringo's just really bad and Adoree Jackson looks shot, then maybe he'll have to. But I think the Eagles are going to do everything in their power to make sure DeJean and Quinyon, those two have the same role as they did their rookie year of 2024. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez, getting you ready for the draft, which is, insanely enough, less than 3 weeks away. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.